Welcome, everyone. I love to see all the energy in the chat room. It's always exciting to see, and people still coming in. Mostly I'd like to start by welcoming Nora, my dear friend. Welcome, Nora. And her red lipstick and red wall shining down on us.
I'm ready. Do you get
it? Took me a moment.
Nice to be here, John.
You have quite a fan club with the Capital Institute community, Nora. I think we had almost 400 people signed up for this, which is roughly twice what we would normally get. So you got a lot of love around you, and a lot of them you've met in our courses, and a lot of them must have heard that they need to meet you. But we're here because we're doing our monthly discovery dialogue, just for those of you that are new. And this is open to the public. We do these almost every month, unless there's some reason like Christmas not to. And they're meant to be we take a topic that's kind of in current events and then look at it through kind of an innovative living systems lens. And we're cheating a little bit today, because the real reason we're here is Nora has a new book out. And so we're here to celebrate that. It's called Combining, and I don't have a copy of it yet, so I'm going to ask Nora to hold it up for a second.
There
there it is. It is a true artifact. It is a series of essays, poems, works of visual art, some prose, and lots of challenges to our brains, I would say, which is typical for Nora, as those of you know, is her thing. But we are linking it to current events, in that we are now deep into the Polycrisis. And after a little bit of introductory discussion, we're going to focus on that. So we're not totally cheating from our normal repertoire. But what I'd like to do, in a sense, as a way to introduce Nora, she doesn't know I'm going to do this, is to read the dedication that she wrote in this book. Because if you listen to this dedication, you'll know something about Nora. This book is offered to your pheromones. I had to look that up. That's a chemical that helps us communicate. So 5 words into the book, I had to use my dictionary. This book is offered to your pheromones that help you fall in love. I give this book to the you of so long ago that felt alone in not fitting into the world people called normal. I offer this work to your one crazy eyebrow. I offer this work to your one crazy eyebrow hair with a twist of its own. This book is for your breath coming and going unannounced, making you implicit in the same wind that moves the clouds and the trees. I dedicate this book to the way in which you know, even as you try to describe a dream, that your words cannot express the vivid realm you encountered there, but you grope for language anyway. These untamed and unmappable phenomena are reminders of uninvited possibilities to be alive together beyond illusions of control. To these possibilities, I offer everything I am. Nora doesn't write books lightly. And what I'd like to do next is actually invite you, Nora, to read your first poem in the book. What's it? At the very beginning.
Where prose stumbles?
Yes, Where Prose Stumbles.
Okay.
And this will help everyone understand the meaning of the title. So this is literally the first, after the introduction, the first bit of the book.
So this book is is a combining of a lot of things. And the idea is that in order to actually meet you, I need to recognize you as an intellectual person, an emotional person, a cultural person, a physical person, a biological system within systems, somebody who's existing within history, a sexual person, a person in relationship in intergenerational ways, somebody that eats and loves and plays and gets lost. And that in meeting you in all of those ways, I'm meeting the ecology of you. So if I want to talk about ecology, I better be ready to actually communicate from within the ecology of ourselves. So the book starts with this poem. Where prose stumbles. Poetry asks us to look beyond words, asks us to seek the kind of blur where clarity is held in combining ideas. This is important, vital even. The process nuances perception and defies algorithms, gobbling up rigid definitions like crispy salted snacks.
Nice. So maybe expand a bit, I mean, on why you wrote this book and why now, because I have your prior book, which I also highly recommend to folks. And the one thing I will say about the prior book is that it is challenging and startling at the same time. But like this book, it's a series of essays. The last one all prose, and
battery 50%. Connected to VSKTOP CT58.
was that you or me or someone else?
Wasn't me.
At any rate, it's honestly, Nora, this new book, and I haven't been able to read it all because it's still on my computer, but it's filled with real creativity and beauty and artwork. Tell us who the artist is.
Yeah, there's 3 artists that were working on this along with myself, but Leslie, Tulane Eubanks, Vivian Young, and Rachel Hench, and the 4 of us have been working together for a long time. So the art that is coming out of this is really deeply infused with the theory and the ideas that are in the book. It's not just that we randomly went and found some pictures to stick in the book. And working with the 3 of them was and is a constant reminder of actually the ideas themselves. So there's been this sort of way of thinking about how we were going to put this book together that might have originally started with, well, what's your goal? What's the outcome? Where are you going to go to? And honestly, that is so not where we are thinking. And so the process of putting the book together actually became a process of putting things side by side, which is what I call side-by-siding. Which is a way of allowing ideas and connections to form in the reader, in the participant, so that they remain wild. The connections are your connections. So we may have laid out this book for you to play in, but what you combine in it is yours. So there's no place in this book where I'm telling you what to think.
And there's certainly no beginning and end.
No beginning, no end. You can start where you want.
Yeah.
And you can, get a couple pages into some of the very hearty theory pieces, which are serious theory pieces. And you might burn out and think, I can't do any more of this right now. I'm just going to read some poetry and look at some pictures. And the theory that you were learning will be in the poetry and the pictures. And once you start to see it move through all different shapes and sizes and expressions in the book, you'll start to feel it in another way, and it will start to stitch together through the stories, through the images, and through the theory. But
I was in a meeting just recently, Nora, at the Garrison Institute, and the theme of the meeting, it was a day-long conference, and the theme was metamorphosis. And there was a brilliant musician who had a real sense of, she had a lot of chutzpah, I would say, and she was very provocative. She would talk and then play her instrument and then talk. And she said at one point, if words could fix this, we would have fixed it by now. And so I think it feels like, as when you said to me, when we first met at that Club of Rome meeting, we were talking about the 8 principles and how to communicate them, and you suggested a picture. So I'm still working on the picture, but so what I want to do, because we're going to run out of time, is switch. We could talk a lot about kind of why you wrote the book and your thinking, but I do want to get into the Polycrisis, and maybe as a way to segue into that, can I ask you to read another poem, another piece, a short one?
Sure.
The Zombie Caterpillar, which one will find on page 200 and something.
61, 261.
Nearly 400. 261, yeah.
On page 261. Yeah, it's not a small book.
No.
It's not a small book. And I think it's important to really, for me, to really express how this book is an ongoing exploration of what's possible in communication. So one of my favorite things that is coming back to me is that people are writing me and saying, ever since I got your book, I'm writing. I started writing poetry for the first time in 20 years, or I'm writing essays, so something's happening where there's a use of language that's opening, a use of expression, a way to talk about something. And there's a lot to say there. There's a lot to express in that. And I just, for me, that's beautiful. That's second order. I wrote a book, and it's not just for reading. It's for writing. That's so
I thought
cool.
we tweeted for that.
I'm going to read you this piece, and then you can go write lots of pieces or paint pictures or dance it, right?
Yeah.
Was it Isadora Duncan who said, along the lines of the quote you just had, if I could say it, I wouldn't have to dance it. This is so important, though, because if we're caught in one form of communication, we're caught in a monocropping of ideas and communication. And that what we know is that is not going to produce the vitality that's needed. So that it's really, really important. The zombie caterpillar is proof of that, because it's super short and cute and actually devastating. So here you
go. The communication topic is one that I remember. I was coming home from a meeting at the World Bank, and I was frustrated, more blah, blah, blah. And I read a piece I had from Elizabeth Saturas, and it opened up by saying, communication is the essence of life, or something to that effect. And it occurred to me that all of this attempting to do the blah, 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 communicate, is actually important work, and how hard it is to actually communicate effectively. And so I definitely think you're onto something. She went on to describe how at a cellular level, if our cells don't communicate effectively, it means you die. I mean, you get cancer, or you get some disease and you die. So at an ecological, biological level, accurate communication is vital. And yet we live in a post-truth chaos world. That's part of the Polycrisis.
And what if you replaced communicating effectively with communicating ecologically? What would that look like? What would that mean? How does a meadow communicate? Right? So that all those organisms are in constant response to one another. there's a field called biosemiotics that looks at this beautiful earth that we live on, not as a biosphere, but as a semiosphere, right? That basically life itself is communication. From your cells to the meadow, to your family, to the newspaper, but all the way up and down through the systems, there is communication. Relationships are made of communication. I'm going to read you this piece now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zombie
The
caterpillar.
zombie caterpillar. There once was the most adorable furry caterpillar. It had lots of wondrous little legs that moved like rows of dancers as it scooched up and down the stems of flowers. Each day it looked forward to munching leaves. Then one day it heard the news that it would soon cocoon, and it would no longer be a caterpillar. It mistrusted the idea of flying around. It was unsure of what or who it would be in another form. It became greedy for more time, being furry and many-legged. It knew life as a caterpillar was a proper and good life, and could not yet understand what it would be like to not be a caterpillar. So it began to bargain with transformation. It wanted to preserve itself unchanged, stealing time and wagering against the meadow it lived in. It hedged its bets and distorted its appetites. Whenever it felt the urge to cocoon, it made adjustments to sustain its caterpillarness until it became a zombie, an untransformed mockery of the lovely little thing it once was. The butterfly that it might have been was postponed. The owl eye spots on its wings were interrupted. So that last line about the owl eye spots on the wings is a reference to an image at the beginning of the book. And if you're actually on video, I can show you that image. Haha. Okay, so clumsy, but here we go. We're not screen sharing. Do you see these beautiful organisms and the way that their spots look like birds of prey or like snake heads? And these organisms are communicating, aren't they? They are communicating in relationship. So first of all, I just want to show you that this is two moths, not one. So they're in relationship to each other, providing that image that will remind other organisms of an owl, perhaps. And the predator of those moths is not owls. The predator of those moths are rodents, or are creatures that live in the meadow, that rodents, lizards, and the predator of the rodents and the lizards and the other little creatures that eat moths are the birds of prey, or the snakes. So this communication is a form of contextual communication at more than first order. Okay, it's a description of how those moths sit together. It's a description of the relationship between the rodents and the owls or the snakes. It's a description of the relationship between the moths and the rodents. And I want this to confuse you. I want this to bother you. I want this to buzz around in you and think, what is contextual communication that's happening at multiple orders? Because it's way too easy to just run around talking about systems transformation. And where I feel my greatest frustration is when that process that is actually such a profound process of when we talk about transformation, we are that caterpillar. It's not about sustaining how we are so that we can make change. And the actual transformative process is big and deep and wide, and multiple organisms, multiple ideas, multiple contexts are involved in that. So my frustration that is, I think, my daily, maybe my passion, I don't know, some days it's my despair, is that the response to this is inadequate. The response to actually taking this in, not only into our intellect or our professional worlds, but all the way into our lives, into our daily routines, into the way we are with each other, our language, the rhythm of our breath, etc. Oh, I think you're muted, John.
My computer was bing bonging, so I shut it off. When I read this for the first time just yesterday, Nora, and it felt very personal to me, particularly the part where you write, it mistrusted the idea of flying around. It was unsure of what or who it would be in another form. It became greedy for more time, being furry and many-legged. It knew life as a caterpillar was proper and good life, and could not yet understand what it'd be like to not be a caterpillar. So it began to bargain with transformation. And I don't share this story much when I talk about my story, but I was bargaining with transformation after I left Morgan, and I became the CEO of a hedge fund, thinking I could have my cake and eat it too. And it became a very painful experience. I got horribly betrayed by my partner, and first and only time in my life I sued someone. And so it was sort of like the universe telling me that no more caterpillar. So transformation is hard, no doubt.
Yeah.
So let's switch to double bind, because we don't have enough time. So I'm going to keep us moving. But that caterpillar story alone is worth buying the book. So toward the end of the book, almost the very end of the book, not the end of the book, there's a chapter, an essay called Meeting Double Binds in the Polycrisis, and then Starting at Home. And a paragraph or so in, you write, understanding double bind theory is a necessary first step toward creatively meeting a polycrisis. So tell us what that means. What is a double bind, and what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. A double bind, this is a theory that was first published in the 50s by my father and a group of people he was working with, who were looking at communication. And in that moment, they were within the sort of the framework of psychology, and the buzzword of that era was schizophrenia. So that was the thing that was the thing. So the first paper that got written on the double bind got written in terms of schizophrenia. I want to be very, very clear that this was not the beginning of the work on the double bind. The work on the double bind started much earlier. And it actually started in the communication and relationship between my father and a woman who was a dancer and a filmmaker and an anthropologist who was studying trance. And her name was Maya Deren. If you're a film buff, you may know of this very artsy, weird, surrealistic film called Meshes of the Afternoon. It's a funny story because I didn't know that there was any relationship between my father and Maya. And when I was in film school, I wrote every single paper on Maya Deren's films, not having any idea that there was a correlation. I later
There's that universe at work again.
You know, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised. Maya Deren is her name. So, but this is an important piece of it. Okay, so the word transcontextual and this understanding of double binds both emerged in relationship with Maya Deren. And the reason I want to bring that to life in this conversation, this is not in the book, by the way, is that there is something taking place in a form of cognition that is blurry and is not formed, and is where different contexts are forming and shaping each other. Okay, and that thing is very difficult to access with reasonable, logical, rational, direct communication. So that's why I wanted to bring that in right away. Okay, so what is a double bind? A double bind is what happens when you get caught in more than one context at the same time. So this idea of transcontextual responses or transcontextual learning or transcontextual experience is primary to this. So this notion that right now, okay, John and I are having a conversation, and you could look at this as that, but there's also a lot of other contextual things happening here. Okay, there's the context of the whole Bateson world, and there's the context of the Capital Institute and your relationship with, you know, Wall Street and all that stuff, and where you've come from. There's the context of your family, and there's the context of my family. There's the context actually of how you're feeling today and how your microbiome is working and how mine is. There's the context of the culture that we share, and there's the context of the cultures that we don't share. There's our generation and how we're pretty close in age. We share a sort of generation understanding. But there's a lot of people in this room that are of different generations. So they are going to hear some of the things we say into their different contexts, right? So all of these contexts and many more are actually merging and coming together, and they form the possibility for learning, and they form the possibility for stuckness and obsolescence. So this is core. Let me give you a couple of examples. The initial example was from the work on schizophrenia, where they talked about the way in which a child could get really confused if its mom, for example, said, "Oh, come and give your mama some love. Don't you love your mama? Give your mama some love, 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 love." And then in the next breath says, "Wait, you have to be independent. So don't come to me looking for cuddles." And then when the child goes off to be independent, it's what? Don't you love your mom? Don't you have any affection for your mom? So there's this feeling that there is absolutely no way to succeed. And this will break you. In some way, there is a breaking, there is a tearing, there is an intense human pain, ache that will come here. But you may have experienced it more presently in a relationship that you were in, and when someone says, "You never tell me that you love me." And you think, "Oh, but I do love you." But the second you say that, you actually undermine your own communication, because you're only saying that because you have to. But if you don't say it, they're right. So it's the big double binds are of how we live, right? So how are we going to live in a way that isn't destructive?
Well, and the kind of the double bind of the polycrisis is exponential growth is the source of our prosperity, and if we keep growing exponentially, we'll destroy ourselves. Isn't that a double bind?
It's also the source of poverty.
Right.
So yeah, it's the double bind. So you want to survive and feed your children and get to next month, and then to do so you have to actually partake in systems that are undermining the potential for survival. They're everywhere. We want to make an ecological model for how we can save the world, but in doing so you might actually create totalitarianism and make an authoritarian a police state for how much protein people can have, how much water they can use, how much land, right? So we have to be very, very careful about these double binds, and they're everywhere. If we were to actually deal with the ecological crisis that we are in, it would look very much like slamming the brakes on the entire economy and the production of most of our products. And in doing so, that would create starvation and poverty and all sorts of other disasters. So to stop the exploitation creates the disaster that actually undermines the process. So now these double binds go deep, and this chapter is addressing this polycrisis issue in so much as it's also pointing to that way in which our family, and I'm going to use the word loosely, okay, maybe that's your kin, maybe it's the people around you, that the family is where the resilience, the extra fat, the possibility, where the hit of the stress of the system is actually covered. Okay, so if you go down, your partner helps to take care of you and helps with the bills, and if your children are in trouble, you stop what you're doing and you go to them. When these multiple intersystemic processes manifest in places in our lives where we are looking at mental health issues, poverty issues, abuse issues, addiction issues, all sorts of, everything from unemployment to just general loneliness. What I think is important to recognize is that those people around are nowhere in the system. They're nowhere. And this is actually where I believe the most care and nourishment needs to be placed right now, as we are entering and we are in this era of multiple crises. However, one of the things that is taking place is that when people manifest these various forms of breaking, of hurting, of being unable to participate in the workforce, being unable to be in and of and reproduce and continue the existing systems, the first thing that happens is they get identified as individually responsible for their problems.
Mm-hmm.
So the fix-it is in the individual. And that fix-it becomes a double bind. So that fix-it becomes, you have to fix this so that you can actually be part of the system again.
Mm-hmm.
That is in fact creating these multiple contextual crises that are expressing into the family. But it used to be that there was more resilience there. People had a little more time. There was a little, now when you're looking at groupings of people that are close, it's very difficult to find anyone who's not in crisis, in case you hadn't noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just not enough fat there anymore. There's not enough resilience in the very place where the actual caregiving is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And our social systems are connected into another double bind, which is that they are dependent on the tax dollars that are produced through the working systems that actually are producing the stresses that are producing the need for the social services, and around we go.
And
So
it's actually worse than that, because as we enter into and now go deeper into this polycrisis, I'll use the word volatility, the chaos accelerates exponentially, which means the need for resiliency goes up exponentially. So right at the time where we've extracted from culture and society everything we can to generate economic efficiency and economic growth, and left us, whether it's because we've leveraged buyout every big company or we've squeezed budgets as much as we can, we've left ourselves as vulnerable and as fragile as we've ever been, right at the time when the volatility is about to spike exponentially, whether it's hurricanes or fires or mental health crises or whatever. So we're getting actually hit on both sides, not just one side, if that makes sense.
we're getting hit on all sides.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, we're looking at various technological issues. So the AI monster cometh, and it's arriving into a world that has been pre-polarized. So the polarities that the algorithms have produced and have fanned the flames of various ideological splits are actually making it so that this very need of people to be able to be there for each other is undermined by the fact that they hate each other and they can't talk to each other. So here we are waving flags and thinking about the romance of community and collaboration at the very moment when people can hardly sit in a room together. So how does so there's the tech, there's the political, I mean, looking at what's happening with the wars that are taking place and just the divisions that ideas about these wars are generating in families, in businesses, in communities all over the world. And how are we going to be able to meet the extreme situations that we will meet? We are meeting them. We're in them now. If we
So the good
can't
news
do
is
it
in
together.
this 10-page or less essay, after a section on communication, there's a section called "How do we get out of the double bind?"
Yes. Okay. Well, we have 15 minutes to get there. Should we do it?
Well, we want to save some time for some discussion questions, so we have 10
Okay.
minutes to get there.
Okay. No problem.
Or
I
5
got all
minutes.
your answers right here, everybody. How do you get out of a double bind? Okay. So remember, I started by talking about trance. And the reason that's important is that the way you get out of a double bind is not the way you think. And it's very, very compelling. You look at the Sustainable Development Goal, 17 goals in their little blocks, and each one is a red hot crisis: poverty, hunger, equality, education, the oceans, the air, the land, the well-being, all of it. It's very distracting. So what you want to do in a double bind is to succumb to those very alarming situations that are so loud that it makes it very, very difficult to reach into other contexts, to begin to meet things instead of matching them. And there's a whole chapter on meet, not match at the beginning of this book that's dealing with, let's just say, map and territory. Okay. But it's something to hold on to, this idea of how do I meet a situation instead of trying to match it. And what I mean by that is that if you set up 17 sustainable development goals and you set up all sorts of different committees to deal with each one, you're matching. Even if you clump 3 or 4 together and you make big spreadsheets, you're matching. What does it look like to meet? What does it look like to come into this from another context? What is another logic, another aesthetic, another approach? And I want to offer you the image of a mother nursing her child. Okay, and just invite you to see that every single one of the Sustainable Development Goals is present there. That as mammals, we have to be able to feed our babies. And to feed the babies means that the mother's milk needs to be clean. It means the mothers have to be in clean air and have clean food, and that the fathers have to be there too. And the other parents and family members and friends have to be able to be there with this emotional, intellectual, ecological being. And that means that the people who grow the food need to be able to feed their babies from clean air and clean water and clean soil. And that has to happen in a sense of human to human dignity, human to other organisms, human to ecological dignity. So I refer in this moment, in this chapter, to this moment when a friend of mine said, I took a leave of absence to take care of my aging mother. Again, notice that sentence. If you have to take a leave of absence from the workings of your social system to tend to life, something's wrong with your social system. Right? And it is. Artists, parents, caregivers, I mean, people who are working with the soil, people who are working on the ground, people who are actually tending to those processes where life makes more life, those people are not rewarded by the systems at all. You actually have to step outside. You have to get a grant. You have to somehow appease someone to be a patron so that you can tend to life. This should tell you something that is terribly wrong. So how do you meet a double bind? You meet by adding more context. You meet by coming in from another direction. The thing is, that direction will not seem like it's on point. It will not seem like it's in linear strategic cause and effect. So this idea of what are the causal processes and how do we rig a cause to fix a problem? How do we rig the causal process to undo a problem? That thinking is in itself part of the double bind. So one of the biggest double binds that we're in is that the way that we are trying to deal with our polycrisis issues is actually contaminated by the thinking that's creating them. So what's radical about this chapter is actually the suggestion. I mean, it doesn't seem that radical to me, but it's the suggestion that in order to get out of these traps, we're going to have to be able to move our perception and our approach into another kind of logic. And that logic has to be able to actually come from multiple contexts. So that's wild. It's wild. It's unfamiliar. It's not part of the bylaws of any board I've ever seen. So it's radical to say we have to actually support the people that are supporting the people. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn to learn together. That a community or a society that is learning to learn together is able to try things out and screw up. Okay, what we want to do is measure the effectiveness. No. Let them fail. The failure is so needed because it's the process of learning together. It doesn't matter what you're learning. It doesn't matter if we effectively teach people in every community how to clean water using, firewood carbons. Like it's not about teaching everybody to be a permaculture farmer. It's about allowing people to do these things together so that they start to have a resilience. So when they meet a situation they've never met before, they're meeting it with a pre-existing relationship that can learn.
I love this, Nora, and I'm wrestling with the notion of a both and here. Like there's lots to be learned from studying permaculture, and
absolutely,
and the regenerative potential, to use our language, beyond what's possible from permaculture in my garden is not something we can know in advance. By definition, it's unseen potential. So it's this both and.
But of course, and that's the thing, is that it's the recognition that none of these things is existing in one context. Right. So you might think, oh, we have to do some particular action to attend to this crisis in substance addiction. Okay. And that may look like rehabs or counseling. And that's true.
And we need to do that. And
yes. Yeah. And if that is not held at a community level where mothers and sisters and grandmas and grandpas and shopkeepers and business people and teachers, and if everybody's not part of that communal effort, then it's actually going to become a reductionist, isolated process that then spits people back into the same system that's generating the situation. So there's this need to go way beyond where right now these institutions are even allowed to be in intercommunication.
Right.
They're not even allowed to. So,
and yet the masters of the universe, I'm reading a book about 4 tech bro billionaires, they are so confident that the kind of the builder tech mindset, the problem solving mindset is, has won the day, and that's all we need is more problem solving. It's yet again, it's getting worse in order that it can break to get better. The whole system is a caterpillar trying not to be a butterfly.
I want to read you the last 2 paragraphs, and then I'll read them.
Read them fast.
Okay, here I go. Actually, I'll skip around. To meet the double bind is to reach into another context and try new things together, with another approach in another tone and toward another idea of what is possible. It will not be the tone of the experts will solve the problem, nor will the tone of the problem is the fault of be an answer. Rather, it's in the tone of no one can fix this for us. Let's figure it out. Groups that can improvise together will be the safest, offer the most healing collective trauma, and be able to meet crises without turning against one another. Not surprisingly, some national defense agencies are beginning to focus on neighborly communal social resilience to strengthen the relationships needed in times of trouble. This opportunity is entirely contingent upon what is possible in the communication. The structure of the existing care systems premised in industrial logic runs through our children's schools, medical facilities, economic systems, and even through technological algorithms that categorize us by our interests and online shopping. The procedural processes and aesthetics of the systems are interlocked into an inability to receive and respond to contextual information, that thing I call warm data. At present, as is evidenced by the inadequate governmental emergency responses, it's difficult to prepare for unforeseen crises. Therefore, better preparedness lies in the readiness to meet any situation with an attitude and aptitude for mutual learning. By contrast, the rigidity of protocol undermines communities' inherent ability to meet polycrisis events together and move through their double binds. Whether people face the traumatic double binds of war, economic collapse, pandemics, climate crises, or a polycrisis combination of all at once, they will need to be able to help one another on the ground, in their families and communities. I would argue that it is critical to help shift those blockages to communing in ways that allow for and encourage mutual learning in specific locales. With the specificity of the people there, let them practice, let them learn skills of how to care for each other. Let us improvise, not randomly or in frivolity, but with the depth of our knowing and our potential for learning. As I wrote in the beginning of this book, there will be no community without first communing.
Beautiful.